The words were ash on his tongue before he'd even spoken them. "I will not say them," Jon told the cold, the men beside him, the gods who watched with frozen eyes from behind rime-crusted limbs. The heart tree's tint was pale as old blood beneath ice. The boys about him looked at him as if he'd grown antlers. Sam's mouth opened and closed, a fish abandoned by the tide. PYP made a rude sound, cut short when he saw Jon's face was not a jest. Even Ser Alisar lost his smile, thin and cruel as the edge of a skinning knife. "Every bastard finds a pride to fit," Thorn said lightly. "Say the words, Snow." The wind worried at Jon's cloak and ghosted the hair near his ear. And for one heartbeat the godswood of Castle Black was nothing but needles and breath. He thought of his father's voice. No, not father, not truly, but the memory was stubborn, and it came all the same. The man who passes the sentence should swing the sword. Ned Stark had not been a man for flight. He had taught Jon to stand. Yet some faults in a father were like a stubborn shadow that grew the more you chased it. Jon had never fled anything before. Duty was a hard road, but a straight one. And yet, a dream had troubled him for 7 nights, and on the 8th he woke with frost on his lashes and ghosts standing over him, teeth bared at nothing. In the dream a city burned without fire, towers oozing molten stone, streets like veins of obsidian. And through the smoke walked something that was and was not a woman, a thing with eyes of furnace green that spoke no tongue but made his heart answer. Come. Above, shadows of wings crossed the sky like thoughts too great for words. He did not know that city, but the heat that was not heat had left him cold in truth, shivering and wanting. "I cannot," he said, and the words went up white. Aemon Targaryen's blind eyes turned to him as if they could see through boys and men alike. "What can you not do, Jon?" "Bind myself to a promise I already know I will break." Ser Alisar made a scoffing sound, but the old maester's milky gaze did not leave Jon's face. "And why would you break it?" "Because the wall is not where I belong." He was surprised to hear his own voice steady. "There is a road I must walk, and it is not paved with vows." "You think yourself some stories, Prince?" Thorn sneered. "Perhaps I think myself a man," Jon said softly. They left him to the wind. The gods did not strike him down. The red sap did not bleed afresh from the weirwood's carved mouth. PYP tried to jape a final time and failed. Sam wrung his chubby hands and said that perhaps it would be different on the morrow. Perhaps the cold had gotten into Jon's head. Perhaps they might talk to the Lord Commander. Jeor Mormont watched him with eyes like flint chips in snow and said only, "You'll have no place here if you turn your back now, boy." "I know," Jon said. He did not sleep. He sat awake until the sky bruised, tracing the shapes of rafters and wondering if a shape could be a path. If a path could be a promise. If a promise could be a lie and still keep something true at its heart. When the cold gave way to killing cold, he rose. In the yard, Ghost moved like mist between shadows. Jon saddled a shag-backed Garen with hands that knew how to do a thing, even when the mind wished to run the other way. He did not pack. What he needed would be bought elsewhere or not at all. Dawn came grudgingly. The castle stirred. No horn called alarm. Jon passed beneath the gate and felt the wall at his back like the pressure of a hand that wanted to hold him still and knew it had no right. He did not ride for Mole's Town. He did not set his Garen's nose toward the King's Road. Instead, he crossed east toward the sea. Word had reached Castle Black that Eastwatch had ships. Word had always reached and left. The Night's Watch was a sieve that pretended itself a cup. Jon did not want a horse's hooves to be his story. Salt and wind, not mud and dust. Snow thinned across the broken hills until the ground looked like a wolf's old pelt. Bald in places, matted in others, the bones of rock showing through. He slept in a shepherd's bothy and left coin for the hearthwood he used. He drank from a stream that tasted of iron and sky. He spoke to no one. Ghost hunted silent as breath, returning with a hair whose blood was hot on Jon's fingers when he dressed it. They were a soundless pair moving toward a line where the land stopped. Eastwatch by the sea rose like a trick someone had played upon the world. Stone coaxed into stands and walls against the very thing that undid all stands and walls. The shallows were full of ice pans making and unmaking themselves, turning over like thoughts too restless to sleep. In the harbor lay a battered galley with a painted woman on her prow whose eyes had been chipped away by storms. The harbor master was a nod of a man with a mouth like an old whelp. "We do not carry deserters," he said, and his hand hovered near a bell. "The Lord Commander's word." "I have not sworn," John said. "I will not. There is no law here in me to break." The man sniffed. "Yet you wear their black. It is a warm color." John met his stare until the man looked away. The harbor smelled of salt and kelp and stale fish and men who had not washed in winter. John said, "If no one will take my coin, I'll hire a boat and put oars in her myself. Storms will put you under." The man replied, but something in John's face made him reach down and scrawl a name with his blunt, wet finger on the frost that clung to his plank desk. "Mollender's Mercy. She runs to Ibn for oil and sometimes to Bravos for whatever Bravos always wants. Her captain took a priest aboard once. Said the prayers kept the ship from splitting. He'll take the coin, or take your dog, if your coin's poor. He is not for sale," John said. The captain of the Mercy was a woman with hair like a storm cloud and hands as brown as oiled wood. She looked at John's face. Ghost size, the long blade at John's hip, not Valyrian, only honest steel, but well kept. And she named a price that would have made him laugh if any laughter were left in him. "You can have it," John said. "What is it you're after that makes a boy sell all he owns and the shoes on his feet?" she asked, leaning on her rail. "A place to stand," he said after a moment, "and a fire to look into that tells me who I am. You'll find neither on the sea. But you might find a tide that will not let you back. Save your coin. Stay and say your vows. Men have climbed down stranger ladders to their lives. I have chosen," John said, and the shape of those words felt right in his mouth in a way the words of the watch had not. Ghost disliked the ship, or perhaps ships generally. The first night, the direwolf paced the deck and stood, nose lifted, at the prow as if scenting mountains ahead. The crew crossed themselves in ways John did not know. They spat. They offered Ghost fish heads and soft speech. Ghost ignored them. In the narrow space beneath the deck, John learned the breaths of the men around him. The hiss of the Ibonese harpooner, the whistle of the boy whose 2 front teeth were a legend among his mates, the caught, light sound of a man who had taken a knife in the lung and never breathed right again. The Mercy moved. The cold lifted and returned and lifted again. The sea was a thing one learned or it learned you. Bravos made good its rumor. It was a city of secrets, and somehow all of them stood out in daylight. John walked the green canal's edge and saw a woman selling tiny bottles of tears with names, and a man on a rope wearing a fish's head for a mask. He watched a boy of 12 fold knives into his hand one after another until he had an entire dinner service and no blood. The Iron Bank had a door that looked like the wall of a warship. The Titan turned its head to watch ships pass and let salt tears stain its cheeks when the wind was a certain way. John felt the city looking back. He did not seek out the house of black and white. He would not know what to do if he found it. Instead, he bought crusts and fish and stood on a bridge and watched the way the city used its water. He found a bookseller whose wares had been protected from damp by the simple expedient of binding with oiled leather and good sense. Here were maps that did not agree with one another. Here were accounts of voyages that ended before they began, or began in the middle of ending. He found a sliver of a book that was more margin than page, full of notes someone had written in a tiny printing hand. He bought it for more coin than its bones were worth because one note said, simply, "We were warned." We were warned twice. "What is that?" asked the captain of the Mercy when he returned with it beneath his arm. "A man's fear," John said, "and his ink. And now your fear and your ink. Eat. We leave with the afternoon tide. Bravos is no place to get used to. The city keeps you. You do not keep it." "Where then?" John asked, though he knew. He had spoken the name to himself so often he had worn it smooth. "Volantis first," she said. "All roads lead there when you are headed for folly. From there you'll hire a ship among madmen and poets." She looked at him, considering. "Do you know why they go?" "Treasure," John said, and the word tasted soft and childish and false as sugar. "Some," she allowed. "More for a story to tell on a dock when their knees are old and their blood cooled. The worst go to be burned clean of something, and some go because a voice has asked them." "What voice?" She shrugged. "The same that asks all of us in different tongues." The one that says, if you go, you might become someone you could live with. Volantis was heat, sudden and wet as a hand clapped to the mouth. John had never seen the sky so white. He had never seen so many slavers who wore their chains like rich men wore rings. Tigers and elephants were politics here as much as flesh. Men spoke those beasts' names as if they were old gods come back for fresh worship. A red temple stood upon a hill, and at night, the fires there painted a portion of the river orange as a wound. Ghost refused to go near it, hair lifting along his back when the wind came from that direction, teeth clicking softly as if he were talking to himself. A priest in red silk with a voice like buttered wine approached John, as he stood on a quay watching eels die in baskets. Azor Ahai walks paths that seem madness to those who have never known a light, he said conversationally, as if continuing a thought John had not yet had. The Lord of Light shows me a boy with ashes on his tongue and a wolf at his heel. I am no one's boy, John said, and had to wonder if that were true. You burn without fire, the priest said, amused or sad. John could not tell. The map of your days is written, and yet I cannot read it. You will cross the black water. You will speak to stone. There will be wings where there have been none. Take care, child. The night is hungry. Whose night? John asked. All nights are one night, the priest said gently. When the god of shadow opens his mouth, John left him. That night in a stinking common room, a cell sail with a nose crushed flat told him of captains who would take coin to run the smoking sea. The names were like the cracked bones of old beasts. Ragged Larka, Brother Kindly, who was neither, the Bride of Flame. The man told his tale twice and took payment twice. John listened twice and wondered whether listening was a kind of coin that could be stolen without his knowing. In the end, he sought a woman with skin dark as oiled walnut and scars along her arms in a neat ladder like someone had once measured her. Her ship was a caravel whose sails had been mended in 20 different hands. You have a wolf, she said as if counting his coin aloud. You have a sword that knows oil. You have a face that thinks it has already heard too much. Yo, you'll be quiet when I tell you to. I will, John said. You'll hold a line if I put it in your hands until your hands bleed. I will. You'll throw burning rope overboard if flame crawls toward your feet, even if what's on that rope belongs to your heart. I will, John said, though he did not know whether he lied. Then you may come, she found, and spoke the price like a prayer. Ghost sneezed at her feet, and she smiled, a flash like a knife turned in sun. Perhaps we will all live to regret this. They called the ship Ember's Grace, though there was nothing graceful about the way she shuddered when a wave shouldered her. The men on her had the look of those who laughed too long into their cups because otherwise they would never laugh at all. John learned knots his father had not known. He learned how a deck speaks to those who walk it. A flex, a whisper, a complaint when something is not right below. He learned the names of winds in tongues that had forgotten what the winds were called on land. On the fourth day, the sky went the color of lead. On the fifth, the water tasted of iron. On the sixth, a smell came from nowhere and everywhere at once, old and new, like a smithy quenched in a grave. That is the doom, one of the sailors said very softly, and did not spit for luck as he might have done in the bite. There were birds, but they did not land. There were shapes beneath the skin of the sea that did not come up. The distant shore was not a shore so much as a memory of shore, as if the sea had eaten rock and not been done and would never be done. Pillars like the knuckles of giants rose and fell, coughing steam. Here and there a tower stood whole and offended by its loneliness. The captain had ordered wool soaked in vinegar. They packed it into their noses when the wind came wrong. It is not the smell that kills you, she told them in her careful, ordinary voice. It is the things it remembers. He dreamed again. He dreamed of the woman of stone walking streets that had never known snow, of her eyes that were not eyes but holes drilled into the world and filled with green the way a wound fills with pus. In the dream he spoke to her, and in the waking he could not remember what he'd said, only that when he woke, Ghost was curled against him like a second heart. They found a quay, a tongue of black glass that thrust itself into choppy water, pocked and slick and humming. Men whispered that such places sang sometimes at night with the music the world made before it learned language. The captain set her jaw and let down 3 boats. "We do not linger," she told them. "Each man takes what he is told to take and leaves what he is told to leave. I do not care if you see a crown of the freehold itself. If I say we go, we go." "What do we take?" John asked. "Stone that is not stone," she said. "Words that can be carried. Things that burn cold." He held the longboat's gunwale and looked at a city that had taught the world the meaning of cunning. He had imagined a grandeur that mocked ruin, but the truth was at once greater and smaller. There were streets, yes, paved with something that had melted and then thought better of it. There were houses like books left too near a hearth. Their spines curved, their pages stuck. There were alleyways where no wind moved, and in those the silence pressed the air thin. They went in lines of 3, ropes linking them like children at a crossing in a crowded market. Ghost took the lead and padded along sure-footed as if he had been born on these treacheries. John followed the captain, who carried a hook and a short file, and behind him came 2 men with sacks. No one raised their voice. The only sound was the small, sharp whisper of grit under boot and the far mutter of something that might have been stone speaking to deep water. The first door they opened swung on hinges that cried like gulls. Inside was a room washed smooth by some ancient heat. On the far wall, someone had once set tiles in an image so vast only a corner remained. A curve of a wing, a hand whose fingers were rings, a face that might have smiled or sneered depending on where a sun had been that never would be again. The captain ran her file along the edge of something that looked like glass and rasped off a curl that made the air taste of metal and nothing at once. She nodded, and one of the sack men put it away. They took pommels and rods and knobs, things that might have gone into other things that no longer were. They took small pages of beaten black metal written with lines that seemed to move when you tried to follow them. They did not take crowns or statues or anything that looked like a story made flesh. John found himself standing before a door narrower than the others, set into a wall that had not blistered so much as flowed and then frozen again. He put his hand to the metal and felt heat. He did not call out. Ghost turned, looked at him, and came to stand at his side, tail a pale question. "Not that way," the captain said. "It knows me," John said, and the sound of his voice in that room was an offense. He did not mean the door. He meant the city. He meant the dream. He meant the part of himself that had stood in snow under a red face and said no. The captain studied him for one long beat, saw something, and did not like it. "Tie him," she told the sack men mildly. "He'll run where the floor opens. He'll feed us to a story." He could have fought. He did not. He let them loop the rope about his waist and another loop about Ghost's neck that the dire wolf suffered with a look of patient contempt. They set off again, and the city closed about them as if it were breathing. The room revealed itself at last like a joke that took too long to tell. It had no door at all, only an archway with carvings that had half slid into new shapes and still remembered their old ones. Inside was a table that might have been a slab laid over a bier and might have been a workman's bench. Above it hung a thing like a bell and a horn and a cup. Black metal shot through with veins that caught the light and threw it back wrong. On the table lay 3 lumps that might have been stones and might have been hands curled into fists the size of a man's skull. "Leave them," the captain said. The word left her mouth unafraid. That was either courage or a habit. "We came for small things. We did not come for riddles." John moved as if someone else had told his feet to. He put his palm upon one of the lumps. It was cold. Then, in the way of some things, it was not. His name unspooled inside him, and it was not the name he had been given, and it was not the name he had made. But it was his. It had iron in it and sky and the line of a sword raised clean and the scent of pine needles crushed under the first true snow. Ghost whined softly as if scolded by a mother and pressed his nose to John's wrist. "Boy," the captain said warningly. "We were warned," John murmured, and did not know he'd said it aloud until the captain's head turned, eyes sharpening. "Who warned you?" "A book," John said. "A hand I will never see." "Take your hand away," she said. He did. The lump was stone again. His palm felt singed as if from frost. He looked at the horn above the table. Its blackness was not the black of night, but of deep water that has never known sun. He thought of sound and what it did to a ship's ribs and a man's bones. He thought of wings crossing a sky. The horn did not sing. It did not do anything. It hung and waited. "We go," the captain said, and this time he obeyed. Outside, the air had changed. A wind had come up, damp as breath, somewhere not near and too near. A block of something fell and the sound went on longer than it should have, as if it were being passed around from ear to ear by things that would not stop playing with it. They made their way back through streets that had learned the trick of turning without moving. A rope went taut when a man slipped, and another man cut it quick and clean, and no one said a word for the one they left because he did not fall. He simply was not there anymore, as if the city had tired of his shape and taken it back. Back aboard, men were sick and then silent. The captain stood looking at the place they had left until the lines of her face eased, as if something had let go of them. "Count," she said. They counted. They were not the same number as before. In John's sleep that night, the woman of stone stood upon the quay of black glass, and her eyes were green fires behind a lattice of cinder. She lifted an arm that had been carved and then softened by heat and pointed, not at him, but at something beyond him and farther away than any map. He turned to see, and there was only snow, and beyond the snow a dark that moved like a muscle under skin. He woke with his mouth full of a taste he could not name, copper and winter and smoke. Ghost growled low, not at a thing but at the idea of a thing. John went on deck and found the captain already there, hair plastered to her skull with sea and sweat. "You touched something," she said, not accusing. "I did," he answered, not apologizing. "I have carried madmen," she said. "I have carried poets. I have carried those who had nothing left but laughter. You are none of those. The worst ones are the ones who will not be made into story because the story is making itself without them. Tell me what hand you think is on the loom now." "I don't know," John said, "but the thread has my name on it." They reached Volantis bruised but whole. Men on the quay counted them with their eyes and then looked away when the number did not please their gods. John sold nothing and bought nothing. He watched a slave with a tiger tattoo on her face laugh with a mouth full of broken teeth and thought of cages and keys. He thought of the horn and the lumps of stone and the words inside his name. He thought of the wall, that long white lie that was also a truth. The mercy was gone, sailed for Ibn and the comfort of cold. Ember's grace would not return to the smoking sea for a season, if ever. John looked north along a river that had been a road before there were roads and pictured winter climbing it. He bought a horse that had never seen snow and took the road west toward the coast where ships for Pentos and Mir and further still made bargains with men who owned no gods but gold. It was on that road he met the girl who called herself Cat. She was too small for her eyes and too quick for her shadow. She rode a shaggy mare with a bite in her and a temper to match and wore her hair like a boy. John watched her throw 3 pebbles and hit the tongue of a wooden idol 3 times, quick as thought, while laughing like a bell that had forgotten it was meant to call men to prayer and not to play. "You have a wolf," she said, grinning down from the top of a mile marker. "I do," John said. "He has me. Does he bite?" She leaned out with the careless courage of those who do not know what falling costs. "Only what needs biting," John told her. Ghost, for his part, watched her with the intense, amused interest he reserved for foxes with more appetite than sense. "Good," the girl said cheerfully. "There are many things that need biting. I'm going to see a man who collects them." She jumped down. "He'll collect you, too, if you're not careful." "What is your name?" John asked. "Cat," she said, and her mouth twitched at its corners as if that were both a lie and the truest thing she'd ever said. "What is yours?" "A name that doesn't fit," John said. "They do that," she agreed. "I had one of those. I cut it to size with a rock. Do you have sisters?" "Yes," John said after a moment, and felt the truth of it strike him so hard it made him swallow. "I do. You should keep them," the girl said seriously. "They come in handy when the world forgets where it put you." She vaulted onto her mare again and was gone in a scatter of dust. Endy, a laugh thrown over her shoulder that Ghost watched until it had finished making the air move. Pentos smelled of oranges and old men's breath. The magister who bought so much of what came and went there had a house whose walls were the color of fat peaches, and in it a hall where boys in soft shoes went quickly when asked and more quickly when not. John did not mean to go near such men. He slept in a common house where sailors told lies that wore the shape of truth and truth that wore the shape of lies. He learned the names Daenerys and Dragon in the same breath, and the way the telling men's eyes changed when they spoke them. "She was a child," said a man with the marks of a lash still visible on his back where the sun had not browned him. "There was a horse. There were 3 stones. Then there was fire. Then she walked out of it with skin." "Men love a miracle that has a face they can put upon a coin," another said drily. "She has 3, they say. I will see one before I die, and then perhaps I will have to believe other things I have laughed at." Jon listened and felt something in him unclench that he had not known was bound. "Wings where there had been none," the priest in Volantis had said. "A horn above a table of stone." A city that remembered a world where such things were as ordinary as a man whetting his blade by the light of a winter window. The first time he lit the candle, it was by accident. He had bought it from a man whose father had bought it from a man whose father before had pulled it out from a magistrate's storeroom with a hand that shook so little it could have been anyone's. It was green as a bottle and smooth as a lie. Jon set it near his pallet in a rented room because the inn's light smoked and hurt his eyes. He did not strike a flint. He did not bring it to a flame. He only looked at it and thought of the room in Valyria where sound had made no sound and heat had had no heat until he remembered his name. The candle burned. It burned without burning, light that seemed to come from behind the world and press through. He saw a girl with a scar across her brow standing on the deck of a ship with a wolf whose fur was the color of autumn leaves. He saw a hall of ice that was not the wall and a boy of 10 slide a piece across a board that was not Sivas and say, "Check." He saw a woman with hair pale as new milk dismount before a great black stallion and lay her hand on his neck. His skin shivered as if it remembered being a river. He saw towers of red stone in snow that never touched them because something in the air refused it. Then the candle's light went out like a held breath released. Ghost raised his head with a rumble that silenced the men in the common room beyond. Jon lay down and did not sleep. He knew 2 things as if they were the bones of his hands. He would not go home the way he had left it, and he would not be allowed to stay away forever. He hired on for a ship that took him south and east and then back west, a wandering that made a shape on a map if you were foolish enough to draw your steps instead of simply walking them. He learned to speak little and listen much. He learned that most men would tell you what you wanted to know if you gave them time to convince themselves they already knew it. He learned to hide a candle's light. It was in Mir that he met a swordsmith with fingers so scarred they looked like old wood carved with a knife. The man did not say Valyrian steel, and neither did Jon. They said words around the one they meant. Fold, quench, sing, bite, remember. The smith set his hands on Jon's blade and frowned at its honest iron as if it had offended him by being exactly what it was. "I can give you a mouth," he said at last, "but it will not be a voice." "A mouth," Jon repeated. "The edge," the smith said with impatience that hid poorly, "a kind of love. I can teach it to bite longer, smoother. I cannot teach it to hunger." "I will pay you because you love your work," Jon said, and the man looked up sharply and then away as if embarrassed to have been seen in a mirror he had not set before himself. He was polishing the new edge with oil that smelled like oranges when a woman came into the shop whose hair made him think of an old tune sung slow by a fire you did not want to leave. She looked at him and then at the blade and then at Ghost, who had found a place in the shade beneath the workbench where he could be overlooked by no one. "You carry winter in a bag and set it down when it tires your shoulder," she said conversationally. "I carry only what I can lift," Jon said. "That is true for everyone," she replied, amused. "But not everyone knows it. I am to carry a message to a man with no name who will answer to Jon at the moment. It is my habit never to know more than that. There are those who say men are safer when women keep their tongues in their heads. I say men are safer when women leave their heads where they are." "Who sends a message to me?" Jon asked. "A man who knows many doors and which to open," she said. "A man whose bed never creaks because it knows better than to betray him. He says, 'There is a girl with 3 dragons to the south and east.' He says, 'The iron chair eats the men who sit it until it is satisfied.' He says, 'The wall is a question that has never been properly answered.' He says, 'Do not go home yet.'" "What else?" Jon asked, because it seemed foolish to ask who. He says, "The wolf in you is not a leash." She finished and smiled. "I prefer cats." She left. The smith did not look up from his rubbing. "Men come into my shop with swords," he said. "They leave with knives they think are swords because they don't listen. You listened. That will keep you one day longer than those men. In the end, nothing keeps a man." He set the blade down and looked at John as if he were an old wound that had finally come to itch. "Where are you going?" "Valyria," John said before he could stop himself. "You have been." The smith said, "You have the smell. Why go twice to the same dream?" "Because I did not finish it," John said. "Because it did not finish me." The second voyage was not like the first. The smoking sea does not repeat itself for those who survive its first lesson. The air was clearer, which made the wrongness easier to see. The city had shifted as if some great hand had picked it up and set it down a foot to the left. The quay was cracked along its length like a nail that had split. The captain of Ember's Grace had taken the coin again with eyes that said she would rather have taken a wound. "You are not a man who can be kept from his worst luck," she told him softly. "I like men I can keep from that." "We are none of us kept from it long," he said. They went back to the room. The horn still hung, sullen and quiet. The lumps on the table were still stone and fist and secret. John touched one again and spoke aloud a word he had not known until the very moment it left his mouth. It was a word for heat that did not burn flesh and for breath that did not leave lungs. A word for first mornings and last nights. The lump shivered as if waking from a deep sleep in a cold bed. A crack ran across it like a smile too slow to see. Ghost howled once, low and long. The horn trembled on its sling without making a sound. "Don't," the captain said. She had her knife in her hand as if a blade could cut a thought in two. Perhaps it could. John took his hand away. The crack remained. He felt nothing triumphant. Instead, he felt as he had as a child when he did a thing and only afterward recognized it was not a thing boys were meant to do. "I will not carry it," he said. "I have no right to ask the sea to bear me and this both. You will carry it whether or not you take it," the captain said, not unkindly. They left the room and the city left them. A man broke his ankle in a street that had not moved until it did. Another put his foot upon what he thought was stone and found a hole and found nothing. The rope cut him in the armpit when they saved him, and he said thank you with no sound. Back aboard, the men were quiet again, but the silence had a different temperature. They looked at John and did not blame him because they feared there was no one to blame. That night, the candle burned so bright in John's mind that he thought it must be visible through his skull. He did not light it with his hands. He thought of snow. He thought of a girl who had laughed upon a mile marker and called herself Cat. He thought of a woman with pale hair in a land that did not want her and of a throne made of the wounds of men. He thought of the wall and beyond it, and the sound of frozen branches in a wind that had nothing to do with men. He saw an army walking without breath, and their feet did not mark the ground because the ground did not want to remember them. He saw a sword blue as denial and a crown white as surrender. He saw a boy put a hand upon a tree's face and the tree open its mouth not to speak, because speech is for those who do not already know one another, but to breathe, and the breath was winter. When the light faded, his face was wet, and he did not know when he had begun to cry. He did not go home. He went south and east, following stories the way a man follows a river when he does not know where it will spit him out. He saw the unsullied drilling in a bare yard and felt sick admiration and something like sorrow that wished to be anger but could not quite learn the trick. He stood on a wall of brick in a city that had once called itself a slave's heaven and watched smoke from cook fires make its own sky. He shared bread with a boy who said his father had been a fisherman and then a soldier and then a ghost. And John thought that perhaps there were not so many ways to be a man as men pretended. In a market, he heard a singer tell a story of Daenerys Stormborn who had broken chains and burned slave masters, and then walked away from a city that begged her to stay because she had learned that to be a savior is to be a stone that eventually sinks. Men argued with the singer and then tossed him coins when he sang the part about dragons lighting the night like lamps. When at last he saw a shadow cross the sun that was not a cloud, his knees went weak in a way that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with the truth coming home after too long on the road. The dragon wheeled with the clean grace of a hawk and made men forget their names. Women cried out and laughed. Children screamed until they forgot whether the sound was terror or delight. John stood with his mouth open like a boy in his first snow. It did not land. It drew its circle upon the world and was gone, and the hole it left in the sky took a long time to close. He wore the image in his head for days like a talisman. He knew then that what he had felt beneath his palm in Valyria had been something like the echo of this. He knew also that echoes make men foolish if they mistake them for voices. He found himself in a city of pyramids and broken chains, and a queen who was 10 different women depending on which man's mouth you used to say her name. He did not ask to see her. He watched men who had once owned other men learn the art of buying with coin alone and fail at it. He watched children play at being dragons and be scolded by mothers who had learned to fear fire. He met a man with wet eyes and a wry mouth who called himself a bear with all his fur combed wrong. "From where do you come?" the man asked over a cup of wine that had not traveled well. "A place where the world is thin and the wind asks you questions," John said. "I have been to such places," the man said quietly. "I have not liked the answers." He studied John as if measuring him for a trap he did not want to set. "You look too old to be as young as you are, and you look too young to be as tired," John replied. The man laughed, a sound like a door that needed oil but Ad decided to sing instead. "There is a queen," he said. "She has dragons. She has a heart. The first cannot be helped. The second is a hindrance. Men with no hearts are worse," John said. "Men with only hearts are fools," the man countered without heat. He drank. "There are wars in her future and worse than wars in her past. Where will you be?" "Where I must," John said, and the bear snorted and lifted his cup in a mock salute and said, "The poets will love you," as if it were a curse and a blessing at once. In the quiet that comes when cities sleep and men who survive the day must decide whether to spend their coin on wine or on a blanket that keeps thieves from your feet. John lit the candle again. It burned green and soft and hard as a winter's sun. He saw the wall and the sea, and the wall was thinner than it ought to have been, thin in the way of a dam when the first crack is born and the men in the valley below go about their lives and do not look up because they cannot bear to do so. He saw a girl with red hair standing in a hall of stone lined with banners, and she was not weeping, and therefore the room itself seemed astonished. He saw a boy, no, a man now, whose face he knew better than his own and whose name he had said in joy and anger and worship and just Rob, bend over a map with a shadow like a wolf behind him. He saw a woman's hands at a loom threading black into white into gray and make a pattern that looked like clouds. He snuffed the light with his palm and did not burn. He lay staring at a ceiling that had more cracks than plaster. The world was making a shape. It would not consult him. He found that both insult and mercy. When he turned north at last, it was not because he had finished anything. It was because the thread tugged and he went. The road home is never the road away turned backward. He came through villages where men had learned to watch the tree lean as if it might grow a face. He came by ships whose crews muttered to ghosts that had not yet been born. He came by way of a girl named Kat who had a new scar along her jaw and the same laugh. And she did not know him, though she looked at Ghost and smiled with her whole face. And John wanted to take that smile in both hands and keep it somewhere safe from the world for when he had to look at something too dark to see. East watch again. A different harbor master. Stinkier fish. "We do not carry deserters," the man said out of habit. "I have never sworn," John replied out of truth. "And if you do not let me pass, I will swim." The mercy was not in. Ember's grace was a rumor told by men who liked to say they had seen the worst of the world and lived. They drank to it and then went home and beat their wives while telling themselves the sea had put that in them. John found in the end a Tyroshi with hair dyed the blue of cheap sky who said he would do anything for enough coin because coin was his god and his god was not particular. John did not like him. He gave him the money. At Castle Black, they did not know whether to bar the gate or leave it open and pretend to be surprised when a ghost walked through. Men stared. Boys whispered names that meant nothing. Gior Mormont was gone, and that was a grief John had not permitted himself but felt all the same, like a bruise discovered in the bath. Ser Alicer had a new sneer and the same old hunger to put it upon someone's face. Sam had a letter in his hand and tears on his cheeks, and when he saw John, he wiped them away with an anger that said, "You do not get to see me cry." Aemon Targaryen's bed was empty and very tidy. He went south. Sam told Jon fiercely before Jon could ask. He went to find a warmer death. The ravens cried like boys. He said a thing. He said a thing, Jon. Sam's breath hitched. He said, "A Targaryen alone is a terrible thing." Jon sat down on the end of the bed, and his hands were very still in his lap. "I am not alone," he said, and Ghost laid his great head upon Jon's knee, as if to make it so before any god might be listening. "You were gone," Sam said, the anger draining as if someone had pulled a cork from the bottom of him. "I did not know where. I told myself a story about it. It was not a good story. I learned things," Jon said. "None of them helped me." "That sounds like learning," Sam said wetly, and somehow managed to smile. The wall stood. It breathed slow. He could feel its breath on his face if he stood close and put his hand upon the old stone. It would hold. It would break. It would do both. At night, with the candle burning a light that was not light in a tower room where boys had carved their names and lovers had kissed and men had sharpened their swords in the dark, Jon looked south and saw fire, and east and saw wings, and north and saw a road through trees that did not want to let anything pass. He looked at the candle until his eyes watered, and he thought of a room in Valyria where a horn hung that had not yet been blown and a stone that had cracked under his hand. He thought of a girl who had walked from fire with skin. The world was a story no one had the measure of. He had refused one set of words to take another he had not learned yet. There were dragons in the east and dead things in the north and men in between who loved and lied and ate and slept and believed themselves the point when they were only the line drawn between. He put his hand on Ghost's head and felt the shape of his skull beneath the thick fur, the warmth that was his and no one else's. "I will go when it is time," he told the wolf. "Not when men tell me and not when fear does." Ghost's eye, red as heart's blood, blinked slow. The wolf breathed out and in, and the breath was the same that had ghosted the godswood when Jon said no, and the same that had filled his lungs when the sea had shown him a city that should not have been. He slept at last without dreams, and in the morning there was work, men to set to their duties, food to count, arrow, to fletch, a letter to write and not send, a winter to prepare for as if preparation were not a prayer you say to make your hands stop shaking. Days stacked like coins. Men came and went. Stories arrived and put their feet upon the table and demanded ale. News of a queen with dragons became word of a queen whose dragons had grown. Word of a king who was not a king became word of a boy who had got himself a crown and a grave in the same season. Names changed. The wind stayed the wind. He lit the candle less often because he feared to love its truth too much. Even so, sometimes the green would grow upon his wall and show him a white mare's plume of breath and a girl's hands brown from sun holding tight to a saddle. A pyramid's shadow cool on a woman's cheek as she leaned over a map and did not see how her face softened when she considered a road that would save more men than it killed. A hall where a boy who had once been him and no longer was him stood before the carved face of a god and said a word that was not the watch's word and made a vow to. Something that had never asked for vows. He waited. Waiting is work men do not honor. He set his jaw and did it. He walked the wall and learned the green of each tree on the other side and what it would look like under snow and then under more snow and then under none. He watched men he liked die and men he did not like live and learned not to take that personally. He sent a man south with a message written not in ink but in the way the messenger's face looked when he listened. One dawn when the sky was very hard and the world's breath was a string pulled taut, the horn blew from the east tower. It was an ordinary horn and made an ordinary sound. Men ran all the same. Ghost was at the gate before Jon. They opened. Beyond, where the road crawled along the wall's foot like a lazy worm, there came a woman on a black horse whose head tossed and pawed at the air as if annoyed by the very idea of ground. Her hair was pale and drawn back in a braid that could have been a rope in a ship's rigging. Her cloak was plain and lined with dust. Behind her rode a man with a mouth that had learned to laugh at its owner's expense and was better for it. And behind him two more, and behind them a thing with wings that did not touch the wall's shadow because the wall's shadow leapt out to touch it first as if in greeting. The dragon landed as if it had been doing that all its life. Men fell backward. Men fell to their knees. Ghost stood with his mouth slightly open and made a sound Jon had never heard before, a kind of pleased disbelief. The woman dismounted lightly, as if all her weight lived in her eyes. She took in Castle Black as if appraising a ship she had been told was sound, but did not believe until she set foot upon her planks. Her gaze met John's. Her chin lifted a fraction. She did not smile. He had not expected her to. "You are the one who would not say the words," she said. Her voice was a river that had learned to go where it wished. "You are the one who went to the city that eats men and came away hungrier. And you are the one who taught the world to look up again." John said, and then, because plain words are a kindness, he added, "Daenerys." "John," she returned, without surprise. She looked past him at the wall. "I have come to see a question," she said. "Men have told me the answer. I would like to look at the question with my own eyes." "Sometimes the question is kinder than the answer," John said. "Then we are in agreement," she replied, and now she did smile, but only a little, as if she had learned the cost of showing men the insides of her teeth. They stood in the cold and looked at the white. Men gathered without meaning to. Ghosts sat and panted a little in the brittle air. The dragon folded its wings with the same care a soldier folds a banner at dusk. "I blew no horn," John said to no one in particular. "Not yet," Daenerys said softly. "And if we're wise, perhaps never." He felt the crack beneath his hand again, the old heat that had not been heat. He felt the wall's breath and the ghost of a city's laugh. He felt the map of his days written and unreadable. He felt very tired and very awake. "Will you walk with me?" he asked. "I have been walking toward this since before I knew my name," she said. "Yes." They walked upon the wall like two thoughts a mind keeps finding again. Beneath them the world continued its habits. Cooking, bleeding, praying, lying, loving. Above them the sky did what skies do when watched. "Once," John said, "I thought my life was a road that ended in a room where men wore black and said a word and then I would be a man. I thought refusing that would make me less. And now," she asked, "now I think there are rooms the world asks you to stand in and say no for its sake," he said. "Not because you are brave, because someone must." "Do you think you are that someone?" There was no challenge in it. There was only curiosity, and perhaps a weariness that matched his. "Sometimes," he confessed, "sometimes I think I am a boy with a candle in a world that has forgotten there were ever candles. I have been a girl with a fire in a world that asked me to be ash," she said. "I prefer the candle." They stopped where the wind made speech work. She turned so that her braid swung like a pendulum measuring something older than time. "I will go beyond this," she said. "I must see. I must know. I must not be the queen of a world I never looked at." "I will go with you," John said. "Not because you are queen, because the question is mine, too." He did not tell her about the horn or the room or the lump of stone that had cracked under his hand. He would, because some truths are a debt. He did not tell her about a girl named Kat with a laugh like a bell or a smith with scarred fingers who loved his work as men love their children. He did not tell her about a priest who had said all nights were one night. He did not tell her the candles green. He would, and then what they were would be different from what they had been. He knew that, and the knowledge stood beside him like a man he could not stop from walking into a room he could not keep from catching fire. For now, Ghost pressed his shoulder into John's thigh, solid and warm and unafraid of dragons. For now, the dragon lifted its head and tasted the air and found in it only what the air had always had. Salt, iron, breath, old stone, new blood. For now, the wall stood. For now, the wind asked them questions. And for now, it was enough to answer by walking forward. They left the wall in a thin blue light that made their breath look like ghosts of questions just asked. The black horse took the slope as if it knew the shape of the land better than men ever would. The dragon leapt from the frozen earth with a snort that sent frost blowing from his nostrils like flower seeds. His wings shook the cold and took it with him. Men on the battlements held fast because they had no choice. Ghost ran ahead, pale pelt cutting a clean mark upon snow that was not yet fresh enough to hide anything. Daenerys did not look back. That was either trust or discipline. The men behind her, her bear and the two who rode like quiet knives, had the watchful stillness of those who knew how many ways a day can go wrong without needing to name them. Jon set his Garen's hooves into the dim prints of older passes and listened to the way the trees tried not to speak and failed. Beyond, the sky lay close to the ground like a wary cat. Where? Daenerys asked when they paused at a stale stream where ice had formed a lace of failed bridges. Craster's, Jon said. There will be nothing there we'd wish to keep, but it is a place the land remembers and men forget, and sometimes that makes a good doorway. Who was Craster? She asked without making him look at her. A man who fed the night and called it worship, he said. Many men have done that, she replied, and it ought to have been a judgment and was instead grief worn too smooth by use to cut. They found what was left where scabbed trees stood with their branches hooked like fingers over a low rise. Blackened timbers, old ash, a stink that winter had tried and failed to swallow. Bones in the snow. Jon dismounted and moved through it with the careful steps of someone crossing a floor he cannot quite trust. Ghost sniffed and sneezed and flattened his ears. The dragon circled. The shadow of his wings made the ruin look briefly like a map of itself from a day when it had not yet learned to be ruin. Leave it? Yora said with the long habit of a man who has learned how little can be salvaged from the worst places. It has done enough harm. Even harm has the decency to teach. Sometimes, Daenerys murmured. Her hand brushed a charred post. It left a clean print where soot did not dare cling. She turned to Jon. You said doorway. Where is the door? He crouched and pushed aside a drift that had crusted and mended and crusted again. Beneath lay a flag of old planks whose ends had been pegged with iron. He worked them with his hands until the skin at the pads of his fingers began to burn and then to numb. The wood gave like an old man's sigh. Beneath, a cellar breathed out a stale breath that had been waiting for them since the day the last fire ate the roof. They lowered themselves into the dark one at a time, ghost last, reluctantly, as if insulted by any place that could not hold all of him without complaint. The cellar's smell was old smoke and sour straw and the faint green wet of things that had no light and no business living anyway. Jon lit a blind man's lantern with flint and patience. Its little tongue of flame made the walls look near and far by turns. There were jars along a shelf whose wax seals had bloomed white like old scars. There were old rush baskets that had become their own dust. There were 2 bundles wrapped in doeskin and bound with a twisted plant fiber that had gone hard. Jon cut the first. Inside, he found a handful of long, black pebbles. They were not pebbles. He knew their heft and their wicked, cold silk, dragonglass. Children of the forest, Yora said softly, almost reverently. He had seen them once, men said, and men lied as often as they breathed. But there was a note in his voice you could not fake. No, Jon answered, weighing a piece shaped like a spear's slim head, its edge keen as water. Craster traded what he did not understand for a knight's peace. He did not carve them. He would not keep them neat. He turned the shard in his hand and thought of the fist of the first men and caches laid down in the dirt like whispered prayers. But this was put here for a hand that would know it. Yours, Daenerys said without gentleness or cruelty. Ours, he corrected. He handed the spearhead to her. She held it and did not flinch from its false cold. Her eyes, close to the lantern light, held the same color they held far from fire. If wing and stone must learn to speak, they will need a tongue they can share. I have a tongue. She smiled without smiling. It has not served me poorly. Then let this be a second, Jon said. They took what a small sack would hold and left what they could not carry without becoming the thing men say when they mean to say thief. In the gray light above, the dragon put his head down to sniff Jon's cloak as if deciding whether or not to humor this ground-bound creature with a measure of respect. The beast's breath was a furnace's ghost. Ghost bared his teeth and then, seeing that no one demanded a quarrel, sneezed again in a way that made one of the quiet knives behind Daenerys cough a laugh into his glove. They pushed north and west, the land lifting in knuckles and then flattening into white palms where the wind had pressed snow into a polished sheen that tried to throw their feet. Jon watched the sky the way a sailor watches the sea. Once, in tea, he near distance, 3 shadows crossed and then crossed again, and not clouds. Daenerys looked up and did not call a name. Jon saw the ungesture and honored it by saying nothing. At the second dusk, when the cold had turned the tips of their ears to hard coins and their horses' breaths to desperate prayers, they saw a thin smudge that was smoke, and then a thicker one, and then the shapes of hides drawn tight between poles and a broken ring of half-fallen palisade. There were men upon the wall in furs that had started as wolves and finished as rugs and boots. There were spears that had been napped by hands that remembered older days. Ghost went forward soft as a rumor. The dragon followed atop the air and kept his own counsel. The gate yawned and banged closed again like an old mouth chewing at the sound of its own hinge. A man came out with a belly that had once been stronger than his pride and a beard that had eaten whiskey and wives. He wore a red beard or a white one stained with the past. It was hard to say in that light. He squinted at Jon and then at Daenerys and then at the dragon and then, slowly, as if saving the best bite for last, at Ghost. "You've brought me a tall tale and an insult." He planted the butt of his spear in packed snow and leaned on it. His eyes were bright with the trouble that kept men alive. "I don't hold with either unless they drink." "Tormund," Jon said, and if the name tasted of a story someone else had told him, he made it his. "You don't hold with gates much, either, unless they keep out men who want to tell you what to do." Tormund peered at him. His mouth opened and then closed around a thought he wasn't sure he wanted. "I've not met you," he declared, "but I've met 100 like you and none of them had a wolf that looked at me as if it knew where I hid my best meat." He jabbed his spear toward the dragon, then toward Daenerys. "And I've met no one like her and I don't want to start. I wake every morning and pray for a boring day. I'm an honest man." "You are a liar," Jon said, and Ghost's mouth opened in what might have been the wolf's own idea of a grin. Tormund laughed, a sound that made the palisade look less likely to fall. "Come in, then. Bring your bird." He eyed Drogon's talons and reconsidered. "Or keep him out where the sky can carry his weight. The fence will die of fright if you try to make him act like a goat." The free folk camp smelled of meat, smoke, leather, and men who had too much to do to be ashamed of any smell. Women's eyes followed Daenerys with the careful admiration one gives a knife with a beautiful handle. Children's eyes followed Jon the way they follow a dog that is too big to be anything but story. They were fewer than they should have been. Winter had taken what winter takes. Other things had taken, too. They ate at a fire that had learned how to behave in wind. Tormund drank sour beer until he sighed like a man who'd remembered an old song and then, at last, looked at Jon straight. "Your black brothers are mean as hunger and twice as stupid," he announced. "They sent boys south with little to say and less smile in it. Their big crow is gone and their old crow is dead and their new crow hates the crow he was before he put on another man's feathered cloak. It's a wonder you keep the cold from climbing down that wall of yours just by the noise you make." "I never put on their cloak," Jon said mildly. "I can see that," Tormund answered with vast sarcasm, waving a hand at Jon's black. "You're a man in a snowstorm who thinks no one can see him because the snow is white." He drank. "What brings you north? The wall isn't where men go to grow warm." "The dead?" Jon said. The fire snapped. A little girl in a cap that had once been a fox's head looked up from where she'd been worrying a strip of hide into a cord and did not look away again. "I?" Tormund allowed after the beat that meant honesty. "They move quiet on quiet days. I have learned to fear the quiet even more than the storm." Daenerys leaned forward, elbows upon her knees, eyes on the flames as if they were a map. "What have you seen? Men that used to be men and bones that used to be bones," he said bluntly. "Eyes like lake ice at night, fingers that can push through a man's leather and make him fall down into himself as if he'd been reminded of a thing he didn't want to know." He rubbed at his beard. "We've had luck, all the same. Fire is a friend that doesn't tire. If you feed it, we feed it." He squinted at Drogon where the great beast lay like a funeral barge that had decided to be a storm cloud instead. "We've had help from things that shouldn't exist except here they are, turning sheep and men alike into stories whether we want it or not." "Have they come in numbers?" Jon asked. "Or only the scouts?" Tormund bared his teeth. "You know too much for a man I do not know." "I know enough to be afraid," Jon said. "That is more than most men. Fear kept men alive before ladders did," Tormund grunted. They've come in whispers and in clumps. Not yet in a flood. Not yet their best. They're waiting for the night to grow its teeth." He emptied his cup. "So, what do we do, crow who isn't? We find the old places that remember warmth. Jon said. "We gather stone that burns cold. We keep the children where the earth knows their names. We don't pretend gates will do a god's work. We walk out to meet what's coming with eyes open." Tormund stared at him for a long 5 heartbeats and then laughed in his face. The huge, heartfelt laughter of a man who finds a stranger speaking his own thoughts back to him with a different music. "I like you," he said grudgingly. "It's disgusting." He slapped his thigh. "We'll take you to the cave with the tree that looks like it died but didn't. It has teeth in the ground that cut like winter." Dragonglass, Daenerys translated, and the free folk around the fire looked at her as if she had just spoken to them. And the voice their grandmothers had used when the stew was ready. "We call it that because your sort like to think dragons made everything worth naming," Tormund said, half testing, half teasing, wary as a dog circling a larger dog's bowl. "My sort thinks we named ourselves," she said without heat. "We were wrong about that, too." Morning made the world feel as if someone had wrung what warmth it had and hung it from a line to freeze. They went in a file of 9 with 2 more ranging ahead and 3 behind. Men who had learned the use of distance. Drogon shadowed them with a patience Jon had not expected in a creature who wore impatience like a mantle. Ghost kept near Daenerys at first, curious and approving and certainly not awed, then ranged out, then returned as if to note how the dragon's tail cut the air. The 2 great beasts did not acknowledge one another much. That felt like respect. The cave lived beneath a bluff where the wind had carved the rock in the shape of waves trying to learn to be mountains. A weirwood clung there, its red leaves shock-bright against the always winter world, its face weathered to a faintness that made it look surprised to still be seeing. The mouth of the cave wore a fringe of iron-frosted teeth. Tormund spat, a neat arc that froze before it dotted the stone. "Don't like the place," he said in the tone of one who has nonetheless been kept alive by using the places he didn't like. Inside, the earth's breath grew damp and slow. They found the first cluster of glass in a cleft near the entrance. Blades and arrowheads and a little blade that looked as if a hand had once warmed it often while waiting for a thing to happen. They found more deeper in, where the light from their lanterns woke crystals in the ceiling and made them wink like old men who'd kept a joke for later. At the back, beneath a curl of rock that might have been a wave caught and turned to stone, lay a scatter of shapes not yet finished. A raw seam of obsidian that would give a man a dozen good knives and a handful of bad ones. "Take what we can and what we cannot waste," Jon said, and the free folk men and the queen's quiet knives and Yora set to, making neat bundles of wicked shards wrapped in thick hides so no one lost a hand. Daenerys did not take her share first. She held the lantern. The light gathered in the hollows of her eyes and made them brighter. "You've done this before," she observed. "I have waited in the wrong rooms and walked into the right ones by accident," he answered. "If that is wisdom, it is a borrowed kind. Men live on borrowed kinds," she said. Ghost froze, one paw up, a carved thing. Jon had the spearhead in his hand without deciding to. The cave's breath changed very slightly, a thread drawn across a throat. "Out," Jon said as if reminding men of a thing they already knew. "Out now." Tormund's men did not argue. One took their bundles and ran with them. Another backed, spear up, his feet finding the soundless exactness of those who have learned how to leave without offering a back. Yora took Daenerys by the arm and then, when she did not shake him off, simply moved with her as if they had rehearsed this together in some other life. The first white slid from the darkness like a story about a drowned man told a week too late. Jon put the spearhead into its throat, and the sound it made was the same sound snow makes when it collapses under too much weight. It stank of cold storage death. A second came with a mouth full of black water, and a third with fingers that had learned the trick of being more than 10. The obsidian bit. They went down. They tried to get up. Tormund put his heel upon one's jaw and ground until teeth broke like glass, and then set the shard of dragonglass he carried where it must go and made himself breathe. "More?" Yora said, as if noting the weather. His sword was out. In Jon's ear, not exactly in his ear. A remembered priest murmured, "All nights are one night when the god of shadow opens his mouth." "Light," Daenerys said. The word was not a plea. It was a command offered to the world. Drogon's head slid into the cave mouth with a snarl that made the stone remember being softer once. Fire stitched itself across the dark in a hot sheet. The air pushed back. Heat slapped John's eyes until they watered. The first two ranks of whites shriveled and went down to their truths, bone and ash and bad memory, while those behind found themselves pressed toward a death they could not learn and tried, stupidly and forever, to walk around it. The smell woke something old and buried in the cave, and it lifted its voice. Not a scream, not a song. The pure sound stone makes when reminded the world still moves. They withdrew into a hard white day that seemed, after the cave, indecently clean. Steam rose from the cave mouth. For a moment it looked as if breath were coming from the earth. Tormund spat again, without insult. "You bring your own summer," he grunted to Daenerys. "That's rude to the neighbors." She wiped her cheek with a gloved thumb and left a clean stripe. "I have learned to trade warmth where I can," she said. "It does not last. That does not make it worthless." Jon looked back at the red-leaved face. Its eyes had not changed. They never did. He reached out and set his palm to the trunk. It was cooler than flesh and warmer than ice. It was like pressing one's hand to the inside of a story. The world tilted in the quiet way it tilts when men think it stands still. Snow fell sideways across a stone bridge that arched like the back of a sleeping cat. Beneath, black water ran with a sound like whispering in a tongue he halfway knew. A boy, no, not a boy, not anymore, stood with his hand upon an old woman's elbow. He had eyes that had seen too much and not enough. He looked up. He saw Jon as if Jon were the vision. A green candle's trick. "We do not have much time," Bran said. He did not say brother because he did not need to. "Tell me how tea." "Oh, spend it," Jon said to no one with his mouth, and to Bran with the part of him that had learned to listen in rooms that should have had no sound. "You have chosen correctly and too late," Bran said with dry humor that could not quite lift its own weight. "That is how the world works. There is a horn and there are hands, and there is a name that must be said in a place that does not like to hear men." "The horn," Jon said, an ache coming up out of his chest where he had put it so carefully aside. "Not blown," Bran said. "Woken. There are things that have slept too long and do not want to be reminded. You will not like the way they wake. It will still be better than the other way." He tilted his head, the expression a ghost of childhood. "You have met her." "I have," Jon said. "She is better than the songs and worse than the fears. She is a person." "That will be her danger and her salvation," Bran murmured. "As for you?" He touched the old woman's arm as if asking permission and then lifted his eyes back to Jon. "Come north of north. Leave the dead their road. Take the living where the living can learn a different word for winter." "You speak like a tree," Jon said without malice. "I am trying to speak like a man," Bran answered. "It is very hard." The red face took his hand back without moving. The world settled upon its haunches. Daenerys watched him without asking. He nodded, just once. There are some truths for which words are an insult. They moved camp to the bluff. Tormund's people knew how to lift their lives without spilling them. Within 2 hours, the place looked as if it had been there since before the last thaw. The dragon slept with one eye open as if the sky had told him a joke and he meant to laugh only when it would be impolite. The children of the camp brought him offerings. Old bones, a rabbit that had tried too long to live, a string of blue beads, and he took none of them and also did not burn them for the offense, which men read as favor and rightly. By the second day, word found them the way word finds men who do not hide and who have the look of a story in their pockets. A skinny man with hair like straw in a bad wind brought news of a black tree, with eyes that cried ice and a circle of stones that felt like teeth in the earth's mouth. He could show the way for meat he could put between his cheek and his teeth and not dream about afterward. A woman whose hands were scarred in the way of those who put their palms to hot iron for truth told Daenerys of a white bear that had stared at her son and made the boy sleep with his eyes open for 2 days. On the third, the boy laughed for no reason and the mother wept because she knew sometimes laughter is the last word men say before the end. Another spoke of Hard Home as a place of hungry cliffs and hungry waves and the worst hunger of things that learned how to starve without dying. Smoke on the sea without ships. Cries at night that had no throats. Ash that tasted of salt and bone. "We will go north of north," Jon said. "First, this." He touched the dragonglass cache with his boot. "Put knives into hands. Put points onto shafts. Let the children learn the song obsidian sings when it bites. It will keep them from making songs about other things. The queen watched men nap. She watched women teach boys to fit black arrowheads onto straight ash shafts with bindings that would not let go when the string's truth snapped into a target. She took a shard into her own hand and cut her palm because obsidian's lesson is quicker than pride's. She did not hiss. She wrapped her hand and went back to watching, which taught more than bleeding would have. At dusk, the dragon allowed Ghost to put his muzzle against a scale near his foreleg. It was a brief, utterly unremarkable gesture. No one missed it and no one spoke of it because there are some things that must be allowed to exist without men putting them into words too soon. John, who saw it and felt something in his chest ease that he had not known was tight, found he could breathe a little easier. Night brought the first true test. They came in a thin line at first, testing the fence with careless bravery. 3 that had been hunters. 1 that had been a woman whose hair still floated despite the absence of any water. 1 that had been a boy no older than the child who had offered the dragon blue beads. Dragonglass made their truths wake. They fell. They did not like it and said so, noiselessly and forever. After them came the cold, and then after the cold, the scrape of something upon the world's skin that made men's teeth ache. The others came without music. That was their music, the absence. They walked upon the crust without breaking it because winter loves them back. Their blades made air flinch and would cry out in a high, thin note. Tormund threw 3 men at one with a howled obscenity that turned into a prayer halfway through because men are not choosy when their souls are on their tongues. The first man's spear shattered as if he had thrust it into jealousy. The seconds went wide. The third planted a shard of dragonglass in a white calf, and the thing moved with the smooth surprise of a cat and cut him in the belly with a blade whose edge was the memory of every hard frost the land had ever known. Fire, John said, and Drogon answered as if pleased to be asked nicely. Flame laid a curtain between the dead and the living. Frost smoke rose. The white shapes halted and then stepped back as daylight does when the door closes. The air sang with little cracks as heat bit cold, and neither wanted to admit the other's existence. One of the others stepped close enough that its face was face-like and awful. The map of winter with all roads leading to hunger. Its eyes were a color men do not put a name to because the name would break in the saying. It lifted its sword and pointed at John. Not quite invitation, not quite promise. John stepped forward and the thing smiled without moving its mouth at all, only a shift in the air like the draft from a door men forgot to close. Daenerys put a hand on his arm. Her fingers were strong and steady despite the way the cold wanted to climb into her bones. Use the blade that bites, she said, not the honor that eats. He nodded. When the other came at the fire's edge to test what would and would not, John waited for the curl of smoke that hid the thing's feet. He put obsidian where its stride would be, and then stepped backward as if offering his place to a friend. The other's blade drew a line across the air. John felt the cold upon his cheek like a flattening hand and did not flinch. The thing stepped, its heel found the shard, and for one least part of a heartbeat, the world did not know whether it had rules. The other chose a rule and lost. The shard did what it does. The white shape spasmed in a way that had nothing of flesh in it, like a thought struck and falling apart mid-idea, and then blew away in ice shards and a soft, contemptuous sound like sifted snow. Its sword snapped with a sound like crunching a winter apple. The others withdrew in a sheet, untouched by fear and yet leaving, because even the cold is prudent. They did not run. They did not need to. They had learned what they wished to learn. How tall the walls were, how far the fire reached, how men moved when you pressed them with the quiet curiosity of the grave. Sleep came like a thief. Men let it steal because men who do not sleep die all the same, only angrier. John lay with his cloak pulled over his shoulders and Ghost's ribcage rising and falling under his hand, feeling the old animal peace that comes when the beast beside you is unafraid. The green candle in his mind flickered. He did not light it. He had seen enough for one night to make a lifetime of bad songs. In the morning, he and Daenerys stood upon the bluff and looked where the white shapes had been. The snow there had that peculiar, over-clean look of places where death has been busy and then moved on. The weirwood's face did not change. The dragon sneezed and shook his head like a dog. The camp came into its second day of being itself after deciding it would not be something else. Men laughed too loud. Children were quieter than they had been. The day made itself, as days do, out of the things men can carry and the things they cannot. North, Jon said. North of north. Daenerys corrected with a strange small smile that said she had heard a boy tell her that in a place of quiet water and learned from it. We have a road. They let the camp go on living without them. That is the kindest thing a leader can do when he takes his people's fears with him. Tormund sent 2 of his with them and did not pretend he might come himself because there was meat to be found and a fence to set and a child with a cough that sounded like her lungs asking for mercy, and he would not leave that to other men. He clasped Jon's forearm and did not say the thing men say when they cannot bear to speak the truth. He leaned toward Daenerys and lowered his voice as if sharing a joke with a girl who had been a queen long enough to not need anyone's jokes. If he dies, I'll try not to be surprised, he confided. If he lives, I'll try not to make it my story. Do neither, she advised. Let him be. The land lifted. The trees thinned and then thickened and then thinned again, as if practicing their own dying. Stones shouldered up through snow like unburied bones. The sky learned a deeper gray. By noon, the wind spoke constantly in their ears like a friend who had learned too much. They passed a place where old fires had melted snow, and then the snow had melted the memory of fire, leaving behind a circle of ash that would not lie down and be quiet. They passed a frozen fall where the water had frozen while moving, and then decided to keep the shape of motion out of habit. Toward dusk, the land learned to fall away. They came upon a verge where the ground broke and pitched down and down to a valley that had kept its secrets like a miser's last coins. Blue shade, black pines, the thin white feather of a river that had learned to slide under its own ice. On the far side stood a ridge with toothy rocks, and upon that ridge a shape that was not rock and not tree, a thing of old wood and new bone. At its foot, stones set upright in an old ring, their tops crouched under a cap of white that made them look like old men listening with their mouths closed. The door, Jon said. Daenerys reined in, the black horse tossing its head at the insult of being asked to wait. Drogon beat the air with a measured patience, found his thermals, and hovered like a thought unwilling to be abandoned. Yora touched Jon's sleeve. We go down there, and the world will not forget we did, he said. The world never forgets the things that cost it, Jon answered. They descended. The snow on the slope was the wrong kind, the sort that slides when you step upon it as if resenting the weight. Twice they went to hands and knees because dignity is a small price. The ring stones watched. Ghost moved ahead, almost invisible because the light had learned to admire him and take on his color. A few yards from the circle, the direwolf stopped dead. The fur along his spine rose in a neat ridge. He lowered his head, not to threaten, but to listen with the bones of his skull. Do not step into the ring, Jon said. He did not know why he knew it. He knew it as he had known the horn must not be sounded and the stone should not be carried. He held out his palm. The air there felt thicker, like water under ice. He could hear something if he refused to listen too hard. The hum of old things asleep together, the small, incessant gnawing of roots at rock, the memory of summer hung up like a cloak on a nail and forgotten. A figure stood just beyond the circle, so sudden that his mind tried to convince his eyes it had always been there. It was small and slight ND dressed in living things, bark and leaf, hide and hair, hands like new branches. Its face was a child's face and an old woman's and a fox's and the heart of a tree. Its eyes were wet with the seeing of too much. You should not be here, it said without opening its mouth. But you are. That is how doors work. We were asked, Jon said. He found he had put his hand against his chest where the green candle burned without flame. And we were warned. The child. If a word men love for use upon themselves can be used for anything else, tipped its head. You touched the sleeping. You made a crack in waking. It moved its hand, and every tree within sight seemed, in that moment, to sigh. I did, he admitted. The thing's mouth quirked in that brief expression all creatures share when they remember being young and wrong. Good. The world must be cracked to take root. It looked past him to the queen and the dragon and did not start or bow or do any of the things men insisted other men must do in the presence of a woman with a destiny. You are fire, it observed. Not only, but much of you. I am here to keep a knight from eating more than its share, Daenerys said, and that was both too large and exactly right. Then leave your pride, the child said, as if instructing a boy to set down his stick before entering a house. It will not fit inside. Its eyes moved to Ghost, softened with a recognition that made Jon think of the days he had loved his wolf so hard it hurt. You may step through, it said, all of you, but do not speak the names you have been given while you are inside the circle. Names tell the place too much about you. They stepped. The air inside the stones felt like water saturated with the smell of cedar and old smoke. Sound bent itself around the place. The child led them to the foot of the knot tree and knot bone and laid its small hand upon a seam. The seam opened, not outward, not inward, simply went away. Inside lay a tunnel that did not like torches. Their flame sighed as if embarrassed and clothed itself. Bioluminescent lichen took their work without complaint, lighting the passage with the color of the inside of sea ice. They walked for an hour or a heartbeat. In such places time measures according to different rulers. The tunnel spilled them into a hall carved of stone so old it had forgotten mountain and remembered water. The walls held petroglyphs sunk deep, men with antlers, women with knives, wolves and ravens and strange, long-necked birds, a dragon drawn not like a beast but like a rune. Between the figures, hundreds of small handprints pressed into what had once been soft clay. Some were too small to belong to any human child. Some were enormous. Many overlapped, and where they overlapped they made a palimpsest of presence. We were here. We were here. We are here in the way only absence can be. At the hall's heart stood a long stone like an altar that refused the name and a bronze thing upon it that made Jon's mouth remember a taste it had learned in Valyria. A horn, not as large as the one he had seen above the stone table. Narrower, older, banded with sigils that made eyes itch if they looked too long. Around it lay a ring of black chips, as if time had gnawed at it and found it less pleasant than it had hoped. Not a call, the child said. A key. Men always think horn means call. You blow into a thing and your voice comes out larger and you think that is power. This does not want breath. It wants truth. What truth? Daenerys asked, very softly. The one you will have left when you stop telling yourself the stories you like best. The child said, cheerfully cruel. It looked at Jon. You touched a sleeping egg and gave it a crack. You stood where the red trees speak and did not lie to them. You refused the words of men who wished to keep you busy, so they could sleep. Have you any truth left? Jon reached for the horn and did not take it. He set his hand beside it upon the cold stone. The bronze was neither hot nor cold. The sigils made his eyes want to water until he lowered his head and looked at them as if they were not letters at all. Only carvings done by someone whose hand had shaken. The green candle in him revealed nothing. He emptied himself of all the names he bore. Snow, Stark, Bastard, Brother not brother, Prince in a story someone mocked him with, the boy who had loved a girl with red hair and did not know what to do with that love, except keep it somewhere it would not get broken. He let all that go like a man setting his cloak upon a chair and going out into a night where the cold is not an insult but a way to make the blood honest. What was left had no sound. It was a shape, a man standing before a wrong and deciding to be a wall even if it broke him. A hand upon a head of a creature he would die for. A refusal spoken at a tree older than kings. A step off the line men had drawn him to walk one no one could see yet. He set that down upon the stone, not as a boast, as an offering. The horn woke without sound. The sigils straightened in a breath that had nothing to do with air. Jon felt a pressure in the bones of his face. The child watched, eyes very wide and old. Daenerys did not move, as if any shift might break the part of the world where this was happening. Yora closed his eyes and then opened them again because a man is allowed one refusal of witnessing and no more. Ghost's lip lifted, not in threat, rather in concentration. Name, the hall asked, in the way a deep place asks a river its name without any need to hear it spoken. I am, Jon said. He did not add syllables after. The hall seemed to accept this impudence. What do you ask? The place said, and now the sound had a color, pale and winter blue, and a taste like iron. Passage, Jon answered. A road the dead do not love. What do you offer? Asked the hall, reasonably. My breath, Daenerys said from his side before he could answer. My fire. She laid her palm beside his, blood seeping through the rough bandage from the nick she had taken on the dragonglass. Not all of it. Enough. Until there is more. A bargain, said the child, satisfied. Very old and brand new. That is how good bargains work. The stone beneath Jon's hand warmed in a way that had nothing to do with heat. He thought of the wall, of its tired breath and cracking bones. And then of a different wall made of trees and singing and a road that might learn to be a different road under the right feet. The horn did not blow because it did not want to, but a note went out all the same. Not in air, in the thing behind air. The sound said, "Here is a place where winter remembers being a guest." They left with nothing in their hands. That is how you must leave such places if you hope to carry any of their truth to the places where men will insist upon coin. Outside, the wind had changed in a way only hunters notice. Its edge dulled a fraction. Its question shifted from who to when. Drogon lifted his head and tasted it, then snorted as if disliking ambiguity. Ghost shook himself and sneezed, very dignified. "What have we done?" Yora asked with the weary politeness of a man who expects to be told something he cannot accept and must accept anyway. "Moved a stone in a river so that water cannot do what it liked to do," Daenerys said. She looked north. "It will find a way around, but not as easily. Not fast enough to please it." "And us?" he asked. "We will be there to greet what does come," Jon said. "With knives that cut and breath that burns and a road that has learned our names." He glanced at the ring of stones. He did not speak any of the names the child had forbidden, and they did not, in turn, speak him. They took the long path back because there is no other kind for men who wish to survive their own deeds. Word moved quicker than feet. By the time they came within sight of the palisade, Tormund had 2 more fires going than he'd had the day before, and the look in his eyes of a man who had told himself 3 filthy jokes and refused to share any of them because he did not want to waste them on fools. He took one look at Jon's face and spat and shook his head. "You've been under stone with old singing and you didn't bring me a bottle," he accused. "Selfish." "I brought you a quieter night," Jon said. "Boring is my god," Tormund said fervently, then scowled because the admission stung. That night the dead did not come. Men left guard posts feeling cheated and then scolded themselves for it and prayed to their own strange, small gods in their bedrolls. The dragon slept deeply with his head upon his forepaws, eyes not even half open, which men noticed and decided they were allowed half a cup more sleep than fear would have permitted them. Daenerys sat at the lip of the bluff with her knees drawn up and her hands linked about them, girlish posture, queenly stillness. Jon sat beside her because it was where the night asked him to. "You knew to give breath," he said after a time when silence had done enough work. "That is all I have been given to give," she said. "Men make much of crowns and armies. They are only shapes for breath to move through." She tipped her head toward him. "You will have to tell me about the horn you did not take." "I will," he promised. "And you will have to tell me how you walked out of fire with skin." "I was very young and very foolish and very lucky," she said. "Men call that destiny when they wish to pretend they had a hand in it. They sat in the comfort that lives between people who have seen one another answer a question well." In the far distance, something cried in a voice like a woman's, and men looked up and then down and did not go toward it. The wind slid its small cold fingers through Jon's hair and then grew bored and went to do the same to the dragon, who did not bother to pretend he felt it at all. When the dawn came gray and tired, a raven brought a letter that had learned the rough shaking of the bird's flight on the way. Sam's hand. Jon would know that round, carefully angry script anywhere, fighting to be neat on a bird's back. It said, "The South is full of fools. The maester I am is not the maester I was." The wall cracked in my dream and I woke with my wife's hand upon my face and didn't cry because I had work. It said, "If you can keep the North of the North from teaching the South its manners just now, do so." It said, "There is a thing in Old Town that woke and does not enjoy being awake." It said, "I am proud of you and furious with you, and if you die, I will find a way to make you sorry." Jon smiled. The expression cracked skin at the corner of his mouth. He licked blood and it tasted like the Dragonglass Cave and the Weirwood Hall and the horn he had not sounded. "We go south," Daenerys said, reading not only the lines but the line of his face. "We go where we are most insultingly useful," Jon agreed. "But first we make sure this fence has teeth." He pressed the dragonglass into Tormund's hand until the big man swore at the cut the shards gave him and then smiled because he was bleeding on something that would bleed the night back. He set men to teaching boys to hold knives with humility and women to teaching men to bind arrowheads without pride. He wrote to Castle Black and did not send the letter. Then tore it and wrote another whose words were smaller and kinder and did send that. When they left, the palisade looked no taller, and yet the air around it was a different thickness, as if winter had been asked to take its hat off when it came in. The children watched Drogon leap and did not cry at the rush of air. They laughed like bells. Ghost trotted under the dragon's flight as if keeping score. At the wall, Ser Alliser opened his mouth to sneer and found no shape for it that did not sit ridiculous on his face. The men who had watched them go understood what they were seeing poorly and well, and with more humility than they wow. LD have given themselves credit for a week before. Sam was not there to waggle his hands and talk too much. He had done the difficult thing and left. Maester Aemon's room was even tidier. Dust had settled in a thrift of corners that made Jon close his eyes for a moment, because dust is what happens to love when you leave it to model the world. He lit no candle that night. He slept. They went south with the same plainness with which they had gone north. There were no trumpets. There was the plain work of getting men and beast and queen over land that begrudged everyone. At the gift's southern edge, a farmer came to the roadside holding a baby whose nose was red and leaking and said, very calmly, "I dreamed of you." He pointed at Daenerys. "You with the big lizard. You were burning a thing that had stolen my brother's laugh." He pointed at Jon. "You were telling me to get my wife and child and go to the hill with the 3 birches because the ground knew them and would not let us die." He set his hand on his baby's head with an awkward tenderness that made Jon look away. "I woke. I went. My brother came in the morning, but he didn't have his laugh in him. He went away again. I think he was looking for it. He did not weep." "Thank you. We are not," Daenerys began, and the farmer shook his head. "You are men and women," he said. "That is worse and better." He went away holding his child as if the boy might fall apart if set down. He would, in the end. Everyone does. But not now. Not today. The road found them 1,000 little griefs and a handful of small joys. A woman with a broken cart and a broken heart. Men who thought too much of their knives. A village where the only well had gone bad and then, inexplicably, gone sweet again the night before they arrived. A boy who had never seen a dragon and gave up the attempt to pretend he was not afraid and then laughed at himself and held out his hand to touch a scale and did not. Because he had learned something priceless in that instant about wanting and keeping. At Molestown, Olsen crawled out from under its blankets to gawk and then crawled back in with new thoughts in its head and no words for them. At Queen's Crown, the tower stood as if trying to be dignified and failing. A swan swam in a circle in a ditch that had frozen and thawed and frozen. A fool's halo. They did not detour to Winterfell. That was a kind of pain and a kind of courtesy. Jon glanced west once, at a line of hills that always feels like a hand upon a boy's head, even when the boy has forgotten to love it, and then did not glance again, because sometimes the noblest thing a man can do is not to take what he wants yet. Daenerys watched his profile and, choosing the better cruelty, made no remark. Ghost looked west and then east and then north out of habit, then settled beneath the dragon's shade and closed his eyes against any world that did not offer immediate meat. At the neck, men told stories in voices like frogs that rose from mud and tried to be sun. They spoke of reed and reeds and things that vanish into water and are either saints or cowards. They spoke of a girl with a boy's steps and a boy with a girl's knife. They spoke of boats that remembered going under more than they remembered floating. Jon listened until he could not stand the sound of his own breath and then went out into the fog and stood there and let it take the edges off him. Daenerys stood in the same fog on a different bank and tasted salt that was not there. Old Town rose from the south like a man lifting slowly from the bath. Its high tower put a finger into the sky as if scolding a god. The sea breathed in and out, in and out. Rooks were louder here than ravens. Ships made their own little towns as they clustered and parted, clustered and parted. It should have been a place of learning and was. It should have been a place of small cowardices and was. It should have been a place where men told themselves stories about light and were content, and it was not. Something had woken here and did not like it. The citadel's smell was paper, dust, oil, and some thin underodor of something that had been cast too long and meant to keep and did not. Men in soft shoes with hard eyes looked at Daenerys and did not see a queen, and looked at Jon and saw a bastard, and looked at the dragon and saw a failure of their categories. The dragon looked at them and saw meat and metal and decided to lie down and nap, because wisdom sometimes is simply the patience to not take offense. They led them not to the scribe's hearth and not to the vault of Valyrian steel and not to the rookery, all of which would have been clever and ordinary, but to a room that had once been something and now was a spare nothing. The maester who met them there had a ring of iron big enough to hang a hope upon. He had Sam's eyes without Sam's honesty. He bowed because men bow to their own reflections when they wear them upon strangers. "You have woken it," he said without greeting. "You might have left it asleep. You should not build your city over an old dragon," Daenerys said, "unless you mean to feed it." He did not smile. "We feed history and hope," he said. "We starve superstition. Your superstition is another man's god, is another woman's child," Jon replied, tired of cleverness. "What has woken?" The maester saw the way they stood, space given, space taken. No threat claimed and none yielded. He sighed because the fight he wanted would not be the fight he would get. There is a glass candle lit unasked in a room that has stood empty for a century and more. We have shut the door. It does not care. He did not look at Jon when he said candle. That would have been too much like piety. "Take us," Jon said. They went past stacked lives. Codices, scrolls, a skull of a thing with too many teeth, and a placard that had lost its letters. A case of insects preserved because once some man had loved them too much to let them die. The room they came to was very small. Its walls held the moisture of the sea in them like gossip. Upon a low table, a green candle burned without any respect at all for doors, salt, or skepticism. Its light was exactly the light that had burned behind Jon's eyes the night he had set the bottle on a Pentoshi pallet. It fell upon Daenerys' face and made it look like a thing carved to look more like itself. "Who lit it?" The maester asked in that particular tone of men who want a culprit they can punish into a confession that will let them sleep. "I did," Jon said, and the maester turned toward him, scandal and relief sliding across his features like oil across water. "Only not here. That is not how these work." He stepped to the table. The light did not flinch. He put his hand above it and felt not heat, but the very clean sense of the world paying attention. He thought of the horn in the weirwood hall and the line of frost that had spoken his cheek and the dragon's breath in the cave. He thought of a farmer with a baby who would milk goats and complain about mud for 50 years if he were lucky, and the miracle of such boredom. The candle showed them nothing and everything. It burned. It made the room a room where other rooms were possible. Daenerys looked into it and saw, to her later lips, to no one's ears, the sea burning, men cheering, a girl who laughed with her blood sticky upon her face because today, of all days, she had not died. She saw a chair that had eaten too many kings and a hand that refused to set it aflame because there are some monuments you must let die of neglect. Jon looked and saw a boy upon a stone bridge who was and was not his brother. A winter road that led toward a noise like teeth. A woman standing before a weirwood sang a name in a voice so soft the tree had to bend to hear it. The maester looked and saw his own face older and wiser and less satisfied with that. He straightened. "You will call the high tower," he said, as if tests were a kind of prayer. "You will ask for a parley with those who think parley is an advice they give others. You will go and talk to men who think walls can read books. I will call no man who thinks calling is the power," Daenerys said with weary patience. "We will stand where we must and do what we can." She looked down at the candle with a small expression that might have been tenderness. "Keep it," she told the maester. "Not as a trophy, as a friend who reminds you to be better." He nodded because he could not find an argument that did not sound like the meanness of a man who had never loved anything that did not smell of pages. "The South is not ready," he said, and that was the purest truth he had to give. "The night is," Jon said, "and it does not ask if we are ready." They left Old Town with nothing stolen and everything taken. A boy ran after them with a sack of stale buns and a stick he had whittled into a dragon with an idiot smile. He thrust both at Daenerys. "For him," he said, jerking his head at Drogon, then blushed to the roots of his hair when the queen laughed out loud, clean and unafraid, and the dragon flicked his tongue at the boy, and the boy did not faint, which he would boast of until someone married him and made him stop. They turned their faces toward King's Landing and then did not go there. Some places draw you by the nose, and your nose must learn to be proud. They turned east to look upon Dragonstone, because there is a thing to be said for looking a birthplace in the face, even if it does not love you back. The island rose out of mists and memory. Its teeth remembered fire. Its bones remembered the sea. The old tunnels breathed salt and old anger. In the cave where Stannis had once held counsel and made the wrong bargains and the right renunciations, they found what Jon had expected and dreaded and welcomed. Piles of dragonglass that would fill 100 quivers and arm 100 hands with a blade whose habit was honesty. They worked there, and the queen worked there. And the dragon lay in the cave mouth and smoked like a slow-cooking miracle, and the men who carried out the bundles looked as if their backs ached less because their souls were carrying something right for once. Jon napped beside a man from the Stormlands who kept cutting his thumb and swearing in a delicious variety. They told each other their mother's recipes for stew and the best ways to sharpen a knife and the names of stars you could trust when the horizon lied. On the tallest height, where winds are born just to learn speed on their way down, Daenerys stood with her hand upon a carved dragon head that had watched her father fail and did not look away, because men who insist the past is finished have an equal taste for insisting their enemies are, and both are lies. Jon came and stood with her and did not offer comfort because the view deserved better. "We will not sit any chair," she said, tasting the words as if they were steel she meant to keep. "We will raise halls that can be left without dying." "A good hall lets you go without making a noise at your back," Jon said. "A good hall looks like the people who eat in it." They turned from the sea and the old stone toward men who would love neither and learn to walk slower, because the men who cannot yet bear what you bring must be shown how to bear it by degrees. They sent riders with sacks of obsidian to the lords whose ravens had answered letters with questions rather than curses. They rode to Flint's Finger and the Rills and Barrow Tun to find faces that cracked and then set, the exercise by which men become stronger without breaking. They met a Manderly who told them triumphantly that his kitchens had invented a pie that would restore honor to men who had squandered it, and Daenerys ate it and declared that it did. And Jon could not tell if she mocked the man or saved him. News came the way it comes. Wrong first, then less wrong, then right enough tea. Oh, be dangerous. The North's king had fallen and then had not, and then had been a banner in a hall, and then had been a boy with his mother's eyes and too many swords pointed at him kindly. The South had named itself convinced with 100 names, and then discovered it could not recall any of them in a wind. The Riverlands had learned again the cruel joke whose punchline is, "Bridges are stronger than men." The Vale had pulled its hood up and called that wisdom. Dorne counted and said nothing. The Reach took inventory of its apples and armies. The Westerlands weighed itself and found itself surprisingly light. Men still died warming their hands at bad fires. At night, the candle burned. It showed Jon a circle of stones on a ridge where winter had been taught a new word that it liked less than its old one and meant to forget. It showed Daenerys a long road where many small girls and boys who would have died did not, because someone taught their mothers to tie obsidian with a proper knot, and someone told their fathers that pride did not stop a dead thing from putting its fingers through you. It showed both of them a chair in a shadowed hall that had learned to be lonely without men sitting it, and seemed almost relieved no one came to scratch its itch. There were failures. They went to a village where every door had been shut from the outside and every window nailed and every house a black box with a small sound inside it that would not stop because sound is stubborn. There were only bones there and a dog that would not let anyone touch the smallest of them. Drogon burned the place and the fire went out 3 times before it consented to do its work because the night had been hard at work there, and the night does not relinquish what it has paid for without billing you twice. Jon killed a man who had killed 2 boys for stealing apples. He did it without pride and without mercy and without kindness, which is the pure way of such things. He did not seek Daenerys' eyes afterward, and she did not give him hers, because there are some moments that should belong to their own silence. There were mercies. A woman who had been beaten into quiet found her voice at a fire and told her husband she would bury him if he raised a hand to any child again. He laughed and then saw the wolf sitting behind the queen and the man with the tired eyes and did not laugh again. Not because he feared death, but because he feared seeing himself in their faces. An old man who had once ridden with Rhaegar sang a song to the dragon in a shaking tenor, and the beast put his head down as if listening to the old, thin notes that still remembered honor. A boy learned to fletch and did it badly, and then did it better, and then taught another boy to do it better still, which is all a world can ask. When they reached the trident, spring had decided it would show the north what it could do. Green dared the edges of things. Men wore fewer furs and more knives. A girl with dirty knees and a new scar on her chin watched them from a tree, and then disappeared as if someone had pulled her back into the leaves by a string. Jon's heart ran after her without leaving his body and then snorted at himself because a man can love 3 girls and a wolf and a queen and a chair he refuses and still be a whole thing if he knows what to do with each love. King's Landing, Yora said one morning, because someone had to test the word on his tongue. Not yet, Daenerys said. It is a chair with a city attached. We have no use for chairs. Let it wait until it can be a place. She looked at Jon. We will go to a bridge instead. The one men have forgotten and the water has not. They did, and there met men with gold lions on their breasts and men with flowers and men with no badge except hunger. They met all of them with open hands that held nothing and frightened more men than swords would have. They were called fools and then prophets and then tyrants and then saints and then, finally, tired. That last was true. It rarely is the insult men intend. Word rode ahead of them to the Eyrie and the Rock and the Sunspear and Storm's End, that old stubborn tooth. Word learned to say, not conquerors, not saviors, workmen. Word learned to say, the north of the north is quieter than it was, and we do not know why, and perhaps we do not need to know the why if the quiet holds. Word learned to say, there is a dragon at the wall, and it does not eat men who hold their fear like men and not like boys. Word learned to say Jon's name more softly and Daenerys's more simply, because in the end men prefer names they can say with their mouths full. Summer sniffed at the edge of the map and dared a toe onto the shore. They went back north when the wind asked them to. They did not need letters or ravens. A change in the smell of the dark was enough. At Tormund's palisade, they found more children than when they had left and fewer men and women, which is the usual dire arithmetic of survival, and still, the laughter had learned a new, deep note, earned, not merely taken. Tormund accused them again of selfishness and then set a girl upon Daenerys' lap because she had lost her mother and bit everyone who tried to hold her and did not bite the queen at all. The girl slept across Daenerys' thighs like a thrown cloak and drooled. Daenerys looked at the wet patch after and laughed the way she had at the boy in Old Town. The ring of stones on the ridge had learned to be a place men looked at with their mouths closed. Jon went there alone this time, because there are things you must either do alone or not do at all. He stepped within and set his hand to the old truth. The horn did not call. It waited, as is its way. He put down the new days he had made since he had last been here. He felt the walls breath easier. He felt the line of cold pressed back and sulking and choosing new roads with less appetite. He felt the woman of stone in Valyria standing upon the quay of black glass, her green eye holes turned west this time, and not unfriendly. He stepped out of the circle the same size as he had gone in and strangely larger. On a night when the aurora walked its thin, sly foot across the sky like a courtesan testing the strength of a balcony, they made a fire on the wall. Men shouted about the foolishness of it and then came to stand near and learn foolishness anew. Drogon lay with his belly to the ice, his heat making the surface sweat. He did not slip. Ghost found a place with an impertinent view. Jon and Daenerys stood in the firelight, close and not touching. I am not the king they want, Jon said into the friendly crackle. I am not the queen they deserve, she said, not sad about it. I am the woman who will teach them to deserve differently. And I the man who will teach them to want less and better, he said. She laughed softly. The fire reached toward her face as if it had loved her once upon a time and remembered how. We make a poor pair of conquerors, a fine pair of stubborn workmen, he offered. He looked into the dark north and felt, without candle, without horn, without tree, the thin place grow a touch thicker, The wind's question softened. A far, far crack lulled back into a seam. "It will hold," he said, and did not add forever, because men who add forever to any sentence are fools, and the world hears them and punishes their lips. For a while, she agreed, which is the greatest victory anyone gets. He turned to her. The dragon's eye reflected the fire in a way that made it look like a second sun had got lost and lodged there. Ghost sneezed and rested his jaw upon his paws. The wall breathed. The world, which had always been a fraught, improbable, necessary thing, breathed with it. They set themselves to their tasks. They grew calluses in new places and scars that did not show. They learned the names of children who would live because of small knives tied with proper knots and old doors asked politely. They learned to make halls that could be left, and they left them and returned and left them again, teaching with their absence as much as with their presence. They wrote no oaths large enough to bind them forever because there are none. They kept 100 small promises and taught others how to do the same. In time, because this is what time does. The songs learned to love them, which is unfair to anyone. There were songs with bad rhymes and better truths. Songs that gave them powers they did not have and missed the powers they had used. Songs that were simply workman's songs that go with lifting and mending. In some, she burned the chair and he sat upon a snow throne. In others, they married or did not or died bravely, beautifully, conveniently. The only true song had no words. It was the sound a green candle makes lighting in a dark room where a man can breathe enough to see what needs doing first. They grew older. Their faces learned lines that held more grace than youth often offers. Ghost went to gray around his muzzle and still pretended not to know when anyone said the word old. Drogon learned a slower, lazier circle for cold days, and no one dared tell him he had. Because dragons will not be told, even by those they almost love. The wall learned to creak in new places and groan less in old ones. The horn in the hall of stone lay quiet because quiet is a sound, too. There were new winters and softer summers. Kingdoms practiced making themselves sensible and then failed and then tried again as men do. The south remained the south. The sea remained the sea. The city of black glass across the world breathed, perhaps, a fraction less angrily, or perhaps Jon only imagined that because a man must give himself a story when he refuses so many others. The woman of stone in his dreams sometimes turned her head toward him and sometimes did not, which seems, all in all, fair. Once, on a day when the sky was the color of old linen and the wind had given up pretending to be kind, a girl with a boy's step came to the wall. She had a scar along her jaw and laughter in her pocket. She kept to the shadow of a Merlin until Ghost found her, and then she came out and put her hand on Jon's face without asking. She smelled of the road and of something else, wolf or wind or home. "You did not die," Arya said. She did not seem surprised and was. "Good. You didn't either," he said, and that was a miracle no candle had shown him. Daenerys watched them with a softness like a fire's last hour when the coals do more work than the showy flame. Arya looked over the queen's shoulder and nodded at the dragon without flinching. The beast blinked at her and rumble-purred, and she pursed her mouth and said, "Cat would like you," and then refused to explain. In the deep night, with the aurora bedding down for dawn and the ice singing its clean, patient notes, Jon sometimes set his palm flat upon the wall's old stone and whispered nothing, which is the only prayer the world accepts without asking questions. The breath that answered was his and not his. It said, "I am here because you are, and if you go I will go, and if you stay I will stay, and this is the work, this hand on cold, this refusal that does not harden into hate, this opening of doors that ought not be opened and closing of doors that would eat a child if you let them." He never said the words men had wanted from him beneath the heart tree. He had learned other words, older, truer, smaller. He had said them before a black glass horn and a wet candle and a queen and a wolf and a girl and a city and a wall. He said them again now, under his breath, into the old stone's breath. "I will." The wall breathed back. "We will."